Welcome, everyone. This is part two of our series with our special edition, I guess, with Leilani Sinclair. She joined us a month ago to talk about adult children of sex addicts and the impact and kind of how to navigate all of that. So she was gracious to come back and join us again. So I want to welcome you, and I'll let you kind of
Hmm.
take it from here.
Yeah, thank you. Tammy, thank you for having me back. And thank you to everybody who attended the first and who's here today. Just I'll briefly introduce myself again. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist based in California. I have my own practice in California and also work with Dr. Ken Adams, who is in Michigan as a clinical associate there. My work on adult children of sex addicts uh, really took hold with Dr. Adams. He is the co-author of A Light in the Dark, which is dedicated to adult children of sex addicts, one of the first books on this topic and on this demographic. And since then, starting to do workshops and webinars like the one we're doing now, Tammy. So really just raising awareness and reaching out to adult children of sex addicts, as well as within the recovery community of sex addiction to parents, right? I do a lot of work directly with both. Right now, the awareness right now is pretty low. For instance, there's an untold number of adults who would classify as meet the criteria for adult children of a sex addict. Our work is both to that audience as well as to the parents in recovery specifically, because sex addiction, the a component of recovery from sex addiction is mending your family, you know, and specifically, of course, the impact to children. We talked a lot. We got into a lot of detail about that impact to that adult children have from their childhood home where a parent was in their sex addiction and acting out, and then also the impact as well by the other parent because as we know the trauma and betrayal trauma and living with a partner going through that is very traumatic. There's a lot of conflict. There's a lot of mixed messaging from the child's perspective, and lack of feeling safe, and lack of a understanding of their selves, their budding sexuality, what healthy sexuality and partnership and romance and courtship looks like in a home, where there's this burden on them, and a system that's very much reacting to, to the sex addiction that may be spoken about or may not be spoken about, right? Some adult children, say, I had no idea, right? And others, and I think that's more the majority is, yeah, I knew, you know, maybe I didn't know specifically, but I have these instances. And as, the work continues and, they get help, oftentimes start remembering more, right? More of those things that just didn't make sense, but didn't know how to process, didn't have someone to talk to, didn't feel safe, felt it would, cause more conflict, or, sometimes share to the other parent and that not be received in the way they needed. So two-part, I think the education and awareness is going to take longer to gather momentum directly to adult children of sex addicts, but certainly A Light in the Dark was a huge step forward, beginning step forward in that. And also, Dr. Adams and I are doing a lot of work and are writing a workbook that we want to publish specifically as well to the parents. And again, these are parents who are in recovery. And I'll just make the distinction. A lot of times when I work with adult children who come to me because they saw a webinar or, they read the book, they just happened to, or, a very small number of therapists, but some of them have read the book as well and said, hey, check this out. Oftentimes those individuals say, their parents are not like say especially the one in addiction is not in a place to provide a real genuine healing like disclosure amends, to be part of the healing process. So a lot of that work is really about containment um, and staying safe, learning about boundaries and doing the work like we talked about in session one about telling your story. What is my story? Because it's been so fragmented and there hasn't been really a permission, almost this like implicit, don't talk about this, right? So that's where it starts because that's the first place of like breaking through the denial. And I would say it's not even that person's denial, it's the denial that is rampant in the family system. Right. So, and it takes, it's when you're the first one to do it and you're the child, it's, it really takes a lot of courage and is very painful, but is also liberating. So, so, so that's different from the work. I'm going to go into more detail about which are, parents who understand and are coming to understand through working with CSAT specifically about, hey, let's talk about impact to your children, specifically adult children. And so the workbook specifically is designed around supporting the therapist with tools to do that, and parameters and guidelines, as well as the parents on what is a healing, if you're going to do this, how, what are all the ways that to provide healing and to, provide an unburdening of your child. And also specifically, what are the things that you don't really, that need to shift your kind of thinking around, so for instance, um, it's very different from like partner models. It's very different from where, the non-essay parent, comes in with a tremendous amount of their own trauma. Um, and so so entering this process, which we call a DIAP, which is a disclosure impact amends protocol, is really about putting the hat on of parent, not to any exclusion, but just putting that hat on, and entering this process that really is about bringing freedom to your adult child. And that's I mean, that's like that's recovery advanced or 2.0.
Yes.
It's pretty next level. I really like there's a lot of parents who are willing to do it and want that guidance, and also get tremendous guidance from their CSATs, right? So, we want, and so the workbook is based on the work we've done and specifically the feedback we've gotten from themselves from adult children of sex addicts. So we've done surveys on what's the impact, and then surveys specifically on has there been repair? What would repair have looked like, right? What did you need? What would a heartfelt amends look like to you, right? Would you want that, right? So we're getting so we've gotten over 40 specifically participating in the survey to do that, as well as we did some real in-depth interviews. We did 7 that were quite long and extensive on that on the process that really helped us. There was a lot of similar themes and needs stated that were, yeah, that were really valuable to this work. So we want to put that out there from the perspective directly of the adult child.
It's so interesting. And I'm thinking, yes, higher level. I'm also wondering, is it optimal that both parents, the non-essay and the essay, if participate in this, or how are you finding best to move forward?
Yeah, it's a case by case basis, right?
Okay.
I would say let's start with best case. Best case,
Okay.
both parents are able to be there. You know, there's a lot of splitting that happens to a child within all the conflict and tension and lack of stability that may have grown up with, the secrecy. So, there's a lot of assumptions made or messages that they've received about what they can and can't talk about, right? That's a big one
Mhm.
is holding secrets. So we really want to create like an integration type of environment as part of the healing where they can, from the perspective of the adult child, they can hear an amends from one parent, and the other parent is it's important that they know that their other parent is hearing it, that if one parent is saying, you don't, this is not your burden to carry, I want to invite you to tell your story. We don't have to keep, this is a family secret that, had tremendous impact on you. You don't have to keep doing this, right? It's just as important that they're seeing that their other parent is nodding their head.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would say that. However, there's also a lot of instances where the best case is not present, right? Like I get contacted a lot from the betrayed parent or the non-SA parent going, our family's in crisis. My wife or my husband, we're just in discovery. The children are struggling. What kind of support? And when it comes to the, amends, it can be from the non-SA parent, right? Because, and that's part of the kind of guidelines, especially for therapists who want to utilize this process, is, it's really important that the correct hat is on. So for instance, someone who is maybe even recovery, but in an early place in recovery might say, yes, I want to do an amends process because I want my story to be heard. I really want my children to understand my side, right? That's not where we're at, right? That's again, the premise of this whole thing is that it's centered for the adult child. So if with guidance from within the therapeutic process of a family therapist who is brought on board to oversee this, if that's pretty rigid and fixed, um, then they're not gonna they're not gonna be of benefit here, and really truly this could be quite harmful. We've seen, with those that we've spoken with and in the survey, disclosures gone bad are harmful.
Mhm.
Is that your experience?
Oh yeah, across the board. It's yeah, and so Dr. Rob does a peer case consultation group for therapists who are trained in this, and the number one topic is disclosures. And even amongst those who are trained, there are things that are challenging. So yes, it's just like you're saying. It's like you set things up for the optimal, and things can go, but you absolutely want to do everything, and have the awareness of like, okay, this person's not ready to do this, and they're going to come at it from like, well, you need to understand about me rather than focusing on the child. So, and I'm curious too, like, so let's say there's, two or three adult children in the family, uh, and often they're splitting, and one takes one side and one takes another and all that. So in an optimal situation, if you're doing this with children, because they will also talk, so would you be doing this with, is this a family situation then?
Okay, so that's a great question. And there are um, some therapists do it differently, right? So
Sure.
I can certainly share what I will share that I'm an adult child myself. So it is, so as I think about that, I kind of want to come at it from my own personal perspective.
Thank you.
I received a disclosure with my brother present, and that was really important for me. And
Mm,
I'll tell you why. My role was a caretaker role. I was the one that found out about acting out. I was the one, that was more present for seeing the impact to my other parent, right? I was more the shoulder leaned on. And what that creates for me, and surprisingly, that was an adult child experience. However, that has been happening throughout the course of my life. That's not a new role, right? So I'll share that, this is really about shame. Like this is the trauma, is the shame of secrecy, and of dishonesty and deception and the stigma of sex, right? That's at the core. So there is a core shame that I carried as the child who got all the information. There was this kind of implicit understanding that the other child should be protected,
mm.
right? And like, but I could handle it or something. And there's something really important that my sibling was present for that, so that we both had that shared experience, and that I knew that he knew the information that I knew. So then, because what had happened previously is I didn't know if I could share that information. Like, you want your sibling to be a support and to share that support. They're like our best chance at a shared experience, of that can really help us tell our story. But there's a huge divide, and we see that with siblings, that we were actually almost a little surprised at how strong it was, of the divisions, the rupture, the distance that existed between siblings in homes, where sex addiction was present.
So can you explain more, like, is it just like your roles were different, or
Yeah, exactly.
okay, okay. So yeah,
Right.
and how isolating for you, as a role of like, no, I have to be one of the secret keepers, you know,
Right.
and my sibling gets to be the person that's taken care of.
Right. He's much younger. He's right. And so, right. So, he's my half brother. So he
Okay.
not experienced, he has had different experiences. He's had a totally different life experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I could even come at it and wanting to protect him, but also like, and we see this in the roles that are common to sex addiction is, like my feeling, and I can't tell you, like really seeing this working with others is this sense that the burden is with me. Generally, it's oftentimes that and not always, but oftentimes there is a child that holds a lot of the burden specifically and holds the secrets. It's very painful and, like you said, very isolating, right? Yeah.
And I do hear, uh, too frequently of, yes, a childhood discovery, and it's kind of like, the essay is making that person part of the secret keeping, and like, don't tell. And so even from the other parent, and you kind of mentioned, like, you try to go tell the partner, and it's met with resistance, but sometimes it's like, no, like, you have to also hold the secret. So you're in this little alignment over here, and everyone else is out, outside of that.
It's really, I find it very tragic when I hear that. And that does happen. That really does happen. Like putting a child into a surrogate spouse role, which can occur with either parent, frankly, but for different reasons. But there's this collusion that happens in the situation and circumstance that you're talking about that is is very, very detrimental. It- Truly, because then there is this wall that you have with the other parent where you're essentially, like being aligned or weaponized against that parent. And, you may do that with, you know, but inside that is real, real havoc. And, and like cutting that attachment is just so harmful to the child, you know.
And I know, yeah, I mean, it's addiction and it isn't done with malice, but it's just from all of that brokenness. But I'm also thinking, how easy it would be to carry those messages of an unhealthy relationship into, the adult child's, relationships, and to this is what was modeled. And so now, oh yeah, you keep things from partners because that might hurt them, or I mean all of those little secret keeping things, which is, the opposite of what a healthy relationship really is.
Completely. And this is really the crux of why this work is so important. It's not just healing of the past, but it is really this need to liberate and unburden adult children from what they thought was normal, what they learned, from repeating. That's what we do, right? So, I like this quote, I'll read it, is the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of their parents by Carl Jung.
Oh, wow.
I find that very
Would you
powerful.
say that one more time, please?
Yeah, the greatest burden a child can bear is the unlived life of their parents.
Wow.
Right? So, it's a tremendous gift of parents who enter recovery, right? And for both parents that do that, is the greatest gift for their children. And oftentimes, that's such a guiding light for those who have to face that journey, and it's hard and painful and scary, is that they don't want to pass it on, right? And this is a very powerful way to not to remove that shame, to release them from the shame, which is carried shame that was put on them, that in fact is not theirs, and that they can be released from, as well as the negative, like modeling and the invalidating modeling that formed their own self-concept, their sexuality, their expectations of a partner, or, and going on to their own addictions. It's very powerful.
Yeah, and I mean, we hear often, that people are fearful of now my kids are going to automatically be an addict, and I'm like, that's not your message. It's like, could that happen? Sure, but it's more all of this unhealthy, like unhealthy patterns and distortions of what a healthy relationship, are, and even the shame and the core values. It's like, I'm not deserving of, whatever because this is so it isn't. I'm automatically going to become an addict or a sex addict because there's lots of different forms of addiction. But yeah, to interrupt the system and go, yeah, and yes, I love it when people go, it's daunting. I don't really want to do this, but yes, I understand that this is way bigger than, than like I don't want to be stuck, but I also don't want to, have my children be negatively affected by it too. So really important.
Yeah, and it really is. And, I just again want to impress like the jump from being in recovery um to embarking this on this effort to amend and make right with your children. It's a it feels to many like jumping off a high dive. and worrying that you'll forget to swim or know how to land. It feels like that. But in fact, like in it's just so important, like bringing on a therapist who, has that ability to of containment and creating that safe container, and really holding them in that process is it's not that, you know. It is actually, when I work with couples is it's just do this one thing. Okay. I enter with, yes, it's hard to imagine, just like with recovery, right? It's hard to imagine that you'll get to this point where you'll be able to sit down and say, what you need to, but just fill out these worksheets and sentence prompts about what you might want to say and what your fears are. Really like hold their hand through it so, it takes away that fear, terror, because creates a lot of shame to think that you hurt your child. Of course. Loving parents never, they just want the best.
I so appreciate, yes, like don't worry about like when we have to sit down, it's like no, just do this and then you just do the next piece. But that's how, and it's one day at a time. And like I like the 12 steps. You do step one and then you do step two. I mean, it's like this is all a process. It is not, you're going from zero, to 100 miles an hour. um and you keyed into, like I neglected to say about the disclosures, like having qualified people. These are not do-it-yourself jobs. This is not something, I mean, everybody, I want you to have the best outcome. And so setting yourself up, for the best pot, this is tough stuff. You want the support of people who understand and can gently hold the space and guide, each of you, and know what, know what to look for, and the speed bumps along the way.
Right, exactly, certainly. And my mom, after the disclosure, like a couple years after, said, I really wish I had had this available, this information and guidance when we did the disclosure. She said, I felt so blindfolded, going into it blind. And, really like the best intentions, as the betrayed parent, partner, but without, someone to really like help make that process safe and informed. So that was pretty meaningful to me as to why I am really dedicated to what we're doing.
And I mean, sex addiction has been around, but it's one of those that hasn't been talked about, and it still isn't. People, celebrities, talk about their drug and alcohol addiction and go to, but this stuff is much quieter, and so the secrecy within a family, and people can know that Uncle whoever was like, oh, he chronic affairs, and like, but it wasn't talked about other than kind of an aside. And so I can imagine how many adult children are starting to put those puzzle pieces together and going, oh, wait, oh, and starting to see those patterns, and hopefully, and especially with, the work that's being done now, that they can start to go, yeah, no, I wasn't crazy. And all of those things that were told to me, I was put in a position that I couldn't win, as a child, or, growing up, and how to shift that now that I'm an adult.
Right. And bring in that real like compassion, build in that, the permission to, really, of course, I did the best I could, you know, really. And also being able to see throughout this process, oh, it's my parents did the best they could, right? Which is, part of that process of being able to let go of all the things that are left unsaid, the impacts that have never been shared from a child to a parent, that, this process really supports and facilitates the work we do as CSATs. On that, why don't I take a few minutes to talk about just kind of the DIAP protocol?
Please,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So um, so the disclosure, I impact, A amends protocol. And the part that we really impress upon is unless specified by the adult child, what we hear is that disclosure, as in details and acting out history, is not sought by the adult child. Now, the exception, especially we found, could be, for instance, those who have also then gone suffer as well from sex addiction, and like understanding, say, maybe the same gendered parent who also had sex addiction, maybe that does actually help understand to some degree, but to the degree that they state that they would want. But as we know, information can be, quite traumatizing again and harmful. So we're light on the disclosure, and we can kind of confirm this also on an individual basis with each adult child, but really provide, so important is an impact letter from the child to the parents, or a child to both parents separately. And then an amends from the parents each separately to the adult child, or children that are present, right? And so we have some worksheets that we provide, say, to the adult child, where it really like lists harms that they may not even be aware of, or as they're completing it, which has happened, is they'll remember, oh yeah, oh that happened, right? I forgot that that happened, right? So we'll provide like a lot of prompts of ways that that there's impact that needs to be honored and expressed. And a lot of the amends that they're seeking, so much of it is quite simple, right? It's not, uh, say, about the details. It's really about like overall. I want to acknowledge that you've carried this, that you've been burdened, and you've carried this your whole life. I want to acknowledge that you felt that you had to keep secrets and you never should have had to do that. And the way that you share that you're suffering, first of all, thank you so much for opening up and sharing that with me. And and you don't need to, it was never your fault. It was never your fault. Um, uh, a validation and affirmation that the reality that they experienced as a child was real. Um, in that, no, this did happen, right? And a lot of times they don't want to say it because what if it hurt the other parent's feelings?
Mm,
You know,
yeah,
that's a big one.
yeah.
It really is. So, especially that's why the non-essay parent plays such a pivotal role, is the adult child may feel like this loyalty to, I can only state the impact from my essay parent, right? So providing that safety specifically from the non-essay parent, is so critical to this process. It opens up so much because of unprocessed material, that just being able to be told it's okay, you can share what happened, you can share your story, um, is profoundly liberating and can really set someone on a path in their own recovery.
So this reminds me of why it's so critically important to have a qualified professional in the room to be able to regulate and to be watching and making sure that everyone is safe, in this process.
Yeah, and certainly we do like a, an assigned understanding by each party present, about in order to make this safe and to keep the space safe, about what to expect, what's not okay, and encouraging, the adult child. But really, like, that family therapist really keeping an eye to make sure that it's staying on the reason why everybody's there.
So one other thing, and then we've got some questions, but like you said, the level of details, um, and sometimes it could be, they're experiencing some of that. But now if you've got two adult children there and one's going like, yet no details, and the other one's wanting details, would that be a separate conversation with the person that wants more details? How would you handle something like that?
Yeah, this would be at the discretion of the therapist, who's working with them. But yeah, my sense would be if they're, y- my sense would be that it would be separate, right? But also with an understanding of what that could mean and how that could, impact both of the siblings, for instance.
Mhm.
And we'd need to process that as well, right? Yeah.
That
Because,
makes sense.
yeah, because
Yeah.
like, working with also like there's a male, I've worked with like three females as siblings, right? There may be a legitimate, like real value there for them to have that, own talk and own kind of disclosure. That could be really important.
Yeah. And I have one more question, then we're going to get to the questions. But so, we often are dealing with a male addict, female partner, scenario. Have you had adult children who have had, a mom who was a sex addict, and you're working with them from this standpoint?
Yeah, it's a great question. Um, More I've worked with maybe love addiction
Mm,
that may be sex addiction, right?
okay.
There's also again, I've worked with those adult children who have sought me out rather than working through the parent. And it can be hard because in a couple of instances there's been the female, the mother who, is exhibiting love addiction may not be willing to go there, right? And so really again, that's individual work with that adult child on really how to proceed and how to, to empower them regardless of where their parent is at to, move toward their own path and divorce themselves from the entanglements of, being that come with being an adult child. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And that's all tough. Yeah, we talk often to betrayed partners of like, regardless of what your addict partner does, you can heal. And this is, a similar message to adult children. It's regardless of, what they're doing or not doing, there is still, healing, and the opportunity to get the reality check, like, yeah, what you experienced was real, so.
Yeah. No, right. Exactly. Is absolutely the case. There is nothing that prevents healing. However, healing to the family system, for those parents who are able to do it and willing to do it, that is certainly profoundly, transformational to the family system.
So the first question, and you can click on the Q&A at the bottom if you want to follow
Mhm.
along. Do you have an estimated date of publication for your workbook that you were talking about?
We are waiting for that, to get that solidified this week, actually. But it could be like fall, winter, but likely I would say maybe spring at the latest.
Okay,
But
okay.
Hopefully
So
some.
stay tuned, and I'm confident we'll have it on our book list. I put the
Oh,
book list for the link in the chat as well. So, okay, then the next part of the question is, do you offer appointments nationwide? So you're licensed in California and Michigan, and this
yeah,
would be deemed therapy. So,
right.
but do you do consultations or things with
Yeah,
people? Okay.
certainly consultations, yes, and support, and though the therapy component would be working to find a state appropriate therapist, CSAT.
Okay. So then the next one, my husband is in active addiction, so he is not in a place to be able to talk to the kids without putting all the blame on me. I told them that their daddy broke his promises to me, so I need space from him, and that's why he's been out of the house for a year and a half. But my kids are 14, 11, and 7, still ask me, what did daddy do? And they are very upset and confused. What else can I say without hurting my kids or my husband more? Oh, thank you for sharing this. This is like we hear these all the time. So thank
Right.
you. I'm sorry, but thank you for bringing the question.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that is really I mean, that just says so much. That is such a common um hardship that the non-SA parent has to bear, right? And I have so much compassion for her situation and the other parents who are faced with this. So what like that feels like a really lovely way of sharing what needed to be shared, that he broke his promises to me. And it also, I would just say, there, you know, if it seems that the mom, whoever this is also really taking a stance of protection of her children. And that protection is really also consists of protecting them from um, further complicating their relationship to their dad. That's the most important thing that I see here, right? Is that intention, because again, like the just so key is that the impact, especially the unnecessary impact or impact of a parent who is hurt, kind of imparting that hurt to a child who is very confused. It is really common that that child would align, right? In these systems, like alignment is so, one of the reactions to this trauma. So we really, to the best extent possible, right? There's only, it's a crisis situation, so it's also really difficult. But really wanting to separate what you're going through and your complicated emotions from protecting them, because they will be just information traumatizes them that is too much, so that they can't bear, right? And that has to do with their attachment to their parents. So really want to highlight that as just the most important thing. And that already, really seems present here as I'm reading it. And again, like reinforcing those messages of, this is adult stuff. This is parent stuff. Your job is to do kid stuff or 14 teenage stuff. The mom, am taking care of myself. Yes, you see that I'm hurting, but we do hurt in life, and I want you to know that I'm okay and that I'm talking to people, I am getting support, really emphasizing that they don't need to step in. What do you think? What would you, Tammy, what are your
Oh, I was thinking, I that was a beautiful answer, and yes, they're going to keep asking, and I was thinking about how often, addict partners go to about betrayal. Well, she asked, and so they tell,
Yeah.
and it's unburdening themselves, but it's traumatizing the betrayed partner, and that's an adult who's in the situation, and because there's no support or guidance, and so I love that you're like, yep, it's adult stuff. And yes, you see, you're owning yes, things are not, as we would want right now. And, we love your dad. If you do your kid things, and we got this. And, like it's hard, as the betrayed partner parent, like, oh my goodness, a lot. But wow, I really honor that you're holding that safe space for your kiddos. So, but
Truly, like, and that's the thing is in this, it's so important to be reminded, worth reminding that you're not doing it for the dad. You're doing it for the kids. You're doing it for the kids so they don't split. That psychological trauma of, um, and this is really understandable again in traumatized family systems is you want to keep your kid away from my mom is an angel, my dad is the devil. I mean,
mhm,
I really like from an adult child, those words were echoed to me.
mhm.
And we've done great work and they're not there anymore. But when we started meeting, my dad is the devil, my mom is an angel, and that's a statement of trauma, you know. And we really want to keep that integration there and alive and um and yeah yeah I so
And I hope, for your children's sake, that the addict partner is not going, well, your mom is just being what you have no control over that, other than, and well, I don't even know, but, I so honor you for holding the safe space for your kids. So, and again,
there's one other thing too. Oh, sorry,
oh,
go ahead.
go ahead.
um you know I oftentimes I'll reframe that like their question is what did daddy do,
Hmm.
but I really reframe that is am I okay? You're upset. I don't, this is just so much. Am I going to be okay?
Hmm.
That's what they're asking.
Hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense. So yeah, or I don't want to do what daddy did because gosh, I don't want to get, out of the house. I mean, so who
Yeah,
knows what their little minds are
true. Like
thinking.
that's a
So yeah,
great one.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah, it doesn't have to do with the question
yeah,
exactly. Literally being,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, the next question is, what are your thoughts and or recommendations on S-A-Teen? Is there, I didn't even know, is there
I didn't
S-A-Teen?
know.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go
Yeah,
look that one up.
I am certainly going to look that up. Uh, yeah. So, you know, this person can feel free to, reach out to me because I'm certainly going to be looking into that. And I
A
like the sound.
fellowship of young people ages 12 to 19. I will send you the link. Yeah, so
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So we can't comment. Thank you for bringing this to our
Yeah.
attention. I'm going to check it out, but I'm also going to put that resource on our website. So thank
That's
you.
great. That's,
Honestly.
I love it.
So the next one, besides major therapy, how can I best support my child who found dad after suicide attempt from addiction, as he is back home due to having medical issues? Thank you. So the situation is the child is in the house where the dad who attempted suicide is again residing, and the child found dad.
Yeah. I can't fully answer that because, this really involves, a suicide attempt. Yes, it's sex addiction, but that's really such a difficult position.
And I think this question was on the other day, but
Mm.
Dr. Rob suggested NAMI, which is the National Association for Mental Illness, I think, but
Yeah,
N
that's what it is.
NAMI.
Yeah.
There are resources, and what I hear Leilani saying is higher order mental health, and
Right.
then addiction aspects. So
Yeah, yeah, really. No child should have to experience that. Mm.
so have you seen COSAs, and we use betrayed partners who have preoccupation with presenting as a different gender, identifying, no, I'm sorry. Have you seen with Goodness, let me try one more time. Have preoccupation with presenting as a different gender identity beginning in teenage years that never previously presented itself in their childhood, especially a childhood where they were raised without strict gender roles um, so they had options and choices to present as a gender role of their choice. So mm, to me, this feels different than adult children
Uh-huh.
question. Do you agree?
I do, and it gets into like gender identity and gender roles essentially.
Yeah.
That is a much larger question, right?
Yes. And the, yeah. So there are people, I mean, it's like I like math. I use the Venn diagram. You can have this circle and this circle, and there can be an overlap, and they may just be the overlap that may not be related to, they may not be related other than both are occurring. So that one would be challenging to you know
Yeah.
to
I don't
give
think
any
I
kind of
have
answer.
an
Yeah.
informed answer on that, but thank you for your question.
Okay, so we attended this is the
Oh,
Teen
okay.
Zoom. It was very small, based in Houston. Two adult men ran it, a few kids with cameras off. My son never returned. It was not working for him at all. Screening done prior to, so apparently to attending. So, okay.
Uh-huh.
So before I put it on the website, I'll make sure I check it out and get more information. So, and with all the resources we have posted, it's always, take what you need and leave the rest. So they're not necessarily endorsements. There's all kinds of 12-step things. So, um, what therapeutic modalities do you recommend to heal the family system? IFS, EMDR for the whole family, CBT, somatic, something else?
Yeah, developmental family systems um, would be, really, this is a family systems approach, so, really understanding and the fundamental, which is that everybody is affected if one person is affected. And the answer here too is like in terms of the amends and that process, the DIAP, this is really, yes, it's on the one hand, it's centered around the healing of one person in the family system, but that person is also the person who is needs the healing. That's where the healing needs to focus on. And so it is family systems, right? That's the appropriate direction of a family systems based approach to this work, I would say.
You've mentioned, like a family therapist and doing this with the context of a family therapist. Do you like, I would not think this would be a one time, let's go do, this
Mhm.
process, that you would see this as, kind of preparing for doing this. And then
Like a
there
3 to
are,
6 month process. Great
oh, okay.
question.
Thank you. That's helpful. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, certainly.
Okay. So the next question, last May was high level disclosure. My son was 11 years old. The entire weekend I was unconsolable and definitely leaned on my son as the only other person who knew. He seems to be coping well, but I realize I don't know what I can do for him now. He is not open to going to therapy at this time.
Okay, so I can answer this question about the approach, but also must first identify that our work is specifically with adult children because of the developmental component that it has to be there when we're working with kids. But what I can say is that leaning on a child as emotional support is not in the best interest of a child, right? And it's also I always have tremendous compassion for in a world of not knowing, how to deal with this trauma, right? That happened, and again, they're like making amends for that, you know, can be really important, but most important too is maybe not so much, going back and certainly not beating yourself up for that. It's more moving forward is how can I heal? How can I sit with this and move through this and survive this in a way that my keeps my son in an 11-year-old place? Really. I mean, that's really critically important right now. And this is where we see a lot of adult children sharing how hard it was and how it shaped a lot is the overdependence on a non-SA parent on them. It's a great question. I really appreciate coming forward with that.
Yeah, and I was thinking we're almost out of time, so we have another minute starts. But I was thinking, and what a thing for your 11-year-old to see you doing the work of healing. So yes, you were in this really, crisis mode, unconsolable, and you're doing the work to heal. And wow, what a powerful message to model to your child of like, yeah, bad things happen. It's really difficult, and healing is possible. So,
Oh, and
um,
also,
go please.
I'll mention real quick is that Dr. Adams and I are working on like some kind of at least guidance sheet for parents, especially in the discovery in the early phases, preventatively, like approaches that generally are harmful to children, and ways of protecting children in the midst of the tremendous crisis of the discovery. So we're going to do like a set of guidelines for that too, that therapists can share with their clients if they'd like on that, so that we don't have as many adult children needing this kind of support.
Yay. I mean, this is an emerging field, and I'm so grateful for your, work within it, and you being here. And we'd love to have you back. So come back, share more, and we'll be watching for that workbook as well. So thank you, Leilani, so much. Thanks everyone for the great questions. The recording will be posted on our website, and stay tuned. I've got some other special edition webinars coming soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank